I really want to make a video on this game I just recently finished playing, as in I feel like I need to make this video very quickly, because I fear that something bad is going to happen with this game, and I'd rather discuss this game before such a thing happens. What am I referring to? Fans. Back in 2015, about 4 months after it came out, I completed Undertale and proceeded to witness a game that, in its own right, is a very good game, get inundated with a fan base that at times is very cool, but on other times, well, you know what I'm talking about. And that is the fear I have about Omori. Undertale, at least how I witnessed it, began to really get popular because a lot of gaming news sites were hyping it up with articles claiming it was the best game ever, which many fans were also saying. The metric was that for a time, Undertale was one of the highest rated games on Steam, if not the highest. Even today, the game still has a 96% rating on Steam, and if I check through some of the statistics available on its store page, you can find that for a while, before 2016, the game in fact had a 98% rating. But alas, as is how many games become popular, some fans will probably ask their favorite YouTube personality to make a let's play or stream the game, making more people aware of the game, and at the end of the day, a game that may have been played by 50,000 people now has been seen by another 100,000 and perhaps another 50,000 that decide to play it. I'm not saying that alone is a bad thing, okay? I don't think the success of a game is a bad thing in itself, but ultimately it comes down to something similar to the statement, I knew about the band before they got big. There's a reason there's a fan base around Undertale, but a consequence of that has been a fan base somewhat notorious for the shit it does. And I only say somewhat because there's worse fan bases out there, don't get me wrong. Hell, the fact there's so many covers for songs from the game is not at all something to complain about. You know, I just looked up to see if Bossa Nova Megalovania exists, and remember the jazz rendition of the soundtrack exists. This shit's cool, I'm all for it, but I think we all know what I'm actually referring to. I digress, though, because all of what I've talked about so far is a good RPG with a unique battle mechanic, awesome music, and a decent story. Omori is a very good RPG with a relatively unique battle mechanic, awesome music, and very good story. It is a game I knew very little about when getting into it, other than it being a horror RPG, and to say the least, that isn't a spoiler. Remember, we are in an age post-Undertale where killing all the enemies legitimately opened a whole new game for the game. We also live in an age post-Doki Doki Literature Club, so if you tell me, this game is a psychological horror game, and it even boots up with a warning for certain themes, then I already have my expectations set. Seeing this colorful world with music invoking memories of watching Rugrats on a TV only makes me anxious for where the fucked up part comes in. Anyone listen to The Sky Moves Sideways by Porcupine Tree? The benefit of an audio file is that there is an entire sense missing in your perception, so in my opinion, the next note or phrasing can sometimes genuinely be a surprise in certain songs. The best way I can explain it is that in only the context of the first 8 minutes of this song, there was nothing in this song I didn't expect, thus far, because most of this I could get from my impressions of the first 30 seconds of the song, and because I've listened to other prog rock songs. Well, Omori is like this because I know the beginning is going to be real fucking slow in comparison to the ending or even the middle of the game, because the game isn't going to show its hand until later on. It is when you get to the 8-minute, 20-second mark of The Sky Moves Sideways, where you have this Arab electric groove out of nowhere. I expected some change, but not what I got. Yes, Omori has a plot twist. Obviously it is going to. Not everything is a children's show like it seems in the first hour of the game, but it does beg the question, where's the crescendo going to be? To avoid spoilers of certain parts of this game, I'm going to be very vague. So vague that some of what I say will be very hard to discern, but I am going to try to explain why this game is good and why it stood out to me. For one, the story's central themes revolve around friendship. Yes, this anime-looking game's whole story is the power of friendship, but it's not about you making friends along the way to defeat Dr. Evil. I would instead suggest this is about what happens afterwards. More specifically, when you were friends with a group of people in middle school and then drifted apart in the years following. Simply put, are you still friends with someone you haven't talked to in years? Are you still friends with someone even after they have stopped talking to you? Are you still friends when both of you have stopped talking, have changed drastically as people, and are no longer your former selves? A better question that must be asked, do they still consider you a friend? Now granted, for those who have played this game, you know that this is not the only thing this game's story brings into question, as there's certainly more happening. But everything in this game ultimately came back to the power of friendship. From the first moments of the game to the final moments, the entire journey was a journey of friendship, and that is something that has had me thinking while playing this game. Specifically, not so much if people I knew many years ago still consider me a friend, but more the interactions I've had with acquaintances. I say this because consider two scenarios: staying in your room all day alone, or going outside for a day and running around town going to different stores. Now, how many people do you interact with in either scenario? Hell, let's remove the alone part of being in your room and make it where you talk to people online. This game made me consider some of those interactions because it all comes down to seeing people again, and when the final time you see someone is going to be. When will be the last time you see someone from high school in person? When will be the last time you even talk to that person? The last time you talk about or think about that person? Until eventually, as is life, you have passed on and the memory you had of that person is no more. Those who have played the game, you may extrapolate on what I'm referring to with the story of the game. Yet, this is all done with a substantial goal in mind. I don't know if a very slice-of-life game would invoke such a feeling in me as is done in this game, as there is the constant feeling of consequence for what you do. Remember, this is the age where there are variable checks for many obscure things you do in a game, such as if you kill Font Skeleton early on, along with just basic story branching from visual novels and other RPGs. And then the fact that deleting a script file is the right thing to do in a game. So, whether fortunately or unfortunately, I had a very high expectation of how detailed the game could be and what I do right and do wrong. Is there one ending, or are there 20? Is there an entirely different route if I fight this character so early on? Is it possible to play through the whole game, but ultimately fail the main quest of the game? This feeling of expecting anything and not knowing what it will be is something I try to maintain when consuming different media. When it works out, it creates a sort of magic for media in my eyes. Expecting nothing, but getting something amazing in return is always a great feeling, until it goes away. One reason I hardly listen to The Wall or Led Zeppelin 4 is entirely because I never want those albums to feel old to me. I want to always be able to come back to them in 20 years and they still sound as incredible as when I first heard them. Never do I want Jimmy Page's solo on Stairway to Heaven or David Gilmour's solo on Comfortably Numb to lose its feeling. This cannot be said for Undertale. However, before getting into that, I need to talk about some similarities in this game. Omori gave me Undertale and Earthbound vibes, but also surprised me with its use of the RPG Maker engine. The Undertale part is sort of obvious, given the deeper-than-it-looks description that both can receive. The Earthbound feeling, I think, is because of RPG Maker. The engine was utilized in a way that made this game look like the Mother series. Some parts look as minimalistic as Mother on the NES, while some parts feel just like Mother 3. Then there are environments and maps that feel like Mother 2, specifically the forests. The save icon reminds me of calling Dad to save, or talking to a frog to save. Hell, the Mary's Picnic Basket motif reminds me of how the Undertale save stars always had the determination motif. Visually, the menus are less like Final Fantasy and more like Earthbound, even though movement in this game feels no different to any other RPG Maker game. It's weird, really, how, like the Unity engine being associated with shitty asset flips and meme games, there was a low quality expected from RPG Maker, and yet everything I see is the greatest grade of quality I've witnessed from RPG Maker, and by extension is simply among the upper echelons of video games in my eyes. As for Undertale, for as much as this game reminds me of it, I am also reminded of how the mystery of Undertale was intact, even after finishing True Pacifist. Yet as time went on, as the game got data mined and I looked into every aspect of the game itself, The actual limitations of the game became clear. There was no longer a sense of magic of the unknown to the game because I've found everything in the game. Where there is nothing else to find in a walk, what do you do then? Many times I've thought I found as much as I could from, say, the wall. But I've also had many times where I've discovered something new. This is why I didn't want to listen to it all the time, because I did not want to find everything in that album. Likewise, I do not wish to find everything in Omori, because then what else is there left if I decide to play the game again? The carrot is only appealing so long as it is still hanging above you, but discovering everything in a game is the moment when that carrot has been grabbed and consumed. Thus is the existential issue with the disposability of art and media in my eyes. Why is it that people do not like spoilers? It is because you watch a film, or read a book, or take in a story for those details that make the story compelling. Arguably, this is why some spoilers do not completely ruin a story while others may. In my opinion, No I Am Not Your Father is only a spoiler to the unknown aspect of who Luke Skywalker's father is. Yet even knowing that fact, you can enjoy the original trilogy of Star Wars because the story now focuses on how things happen. You know the Death Star will be destroyed, but if your only spoiler to Star Wars was the previous mentioned line, then you may still find it interesting how Luke Skywalker gets out of the Death Star and proceeds to destroy it. Hell, if you were as ignorant to Star Wars as I was for a long time, you may not even know who doesn't make out of the Death Star. What I am trying to say on this tangent is that when a story is spoiled, it is no longer compelling to sit through, because you know what happens. You know what happens, which ironically is what you can say if you've absolutely completed a game. You know every detail of what happens, every turn, every meta for every enemy, and are perhaps only playing the game to see how fast you can beat it. This is why I can never quite get into speedrunning. The only fun you get from speedrunning is the spectacle of the player itself, not the game. This is why I respect a world record run on Mario Kart 64 or some other game, because it actually is interesting to see how a game can be finished. Yet it is not about the game anymore, it's about the player. It isn't really about enjoying the cuisine, the atmosphere, and maybe flavor of the drink you're drinking, but how many hot dogs you can consume or how fast a slice of cake can disappear. When it comes to Undertale, there isn't really a magic to be had with this game. If you wanted to play it, you've played it. If you don't know most things outside of the one route you played, well, you've probably not been online that much for the past few years. A good section of people in the community know the twist of Undertale, the fourth wall breaks of Undertale, the music, the details, all of that. Because the game was wildly popular for a year or so and still is. Yet, Omori is still very new. There isn't nearly as much stuff with this game as there was with Undertale even just a year after its release, and while Omori is only 7 months old, the moment when a big Let's Player, a gaming-related channel, even when a specific analysis and theoretical postulating channel covers it, is when I think we'll see another Undertale. There'll be the few brief months, or even a year, where the community around the game was humble and fairly calm and collected. Then there'll be that moment where the peace times end and the fandom has taken control of the very identity of the game. And that is what I fear the most. There are people who grow tired of the game because there's nothing left of it to find. Then there are the people who grow tired of the game because they grow tired of the community. This is actually something I've thought about with Minecraft on a tangential note, because you can actually see the moments when it was in its golden days, followed by when the kids took over, followed by its downfall, and then its return to prominence, and now its potential second downfall, but with a newer generation. Either way, there are games out there that are good, but have terrible fan bases. There are books out there that are good, but have terrible fan bases. There are bands out there that are good, but have terrible fan bases. The unfortunate fact is, these shitty fan bases can end up being a leech on the very thing they love, until there is no distinction made between the original work and the derivatives. But until that happens, or if it happens, there is still just Omori. Some of the fan art I've seen for the game looks pretty good, some covers I've listened to are good as well, but none have yet to outshine the original. I'm not telling you to play Omori. In fact, I'm not saying you should play Omori. I don't think you need to, nor do I think you have to. What I am saying is that anyone can choose to play Omori, and anyone can then recommend it to someone else. Something I am going to say is that the power to make the game more widely known or kept obscure is in your hands. Something may happen that results in this becoming another Undertale, or nothing may happen, yet after playing this game, something will change. For me, that something was the vague list of games I consider to be my favorite. For Celeste, that was being how fucking difficult the game was, mixed with how rewarding it was to complete it, as well as the awesome music. For Omori, it was the final 5 hours of the game. Granted, I had a feeling early on it would probably be one of my favorite games, so long as it didn't shit the bed. Yet, many times I find a new song that I very much enjoyed. But the final 5 hours of the game, after what was a bizarre adventure like Earthbound, was when the anxious feeling I had throughout the game finally resolved. It was very slow to start, as I imagined the ending to be fairly quick. Yet it got darker. Then as I thought it would resolve, it got darker. Then as I assumed we would reach the final cutscene, it truly got darker. The anxious feeling was back as I knew what was wrong, but the tension did not resolve. During this whole time, it felt like if there was going to be a good ending, it wasn't going to end well. In vague terms, there's a certain feeling I had by the final battle of the game. You had a whole section of the game that was this organized, chaotic landscape with some pretty fucking weird shit happening. Everything then began to make sense, but why? This was the question I had after learning the full story of the game. But why? Yet, there was still more that had to be done. Everything is going to be okay, right? Yet, this battle was the breaking point. I didn't quite expect what happened, yet as I figured out what the ending was going to be, I got excited for what I thought was going to be an incredible fight. I don't think I expected why it was going to be incredible. I don't think I realized there was a reason the music in this game was consistently incredible. But here I was, seeing what I was seeing, and hearing what I was hearing. In the 8th grade, I picked up an instrument. I knew some friends of mine played some instruments, though I knew virtually nothing about music. I had no physical skill with music, so while you could show me a piano and I'd know where middle C was, if you handed me a stringed instrument, I'd just look at it funny. It was all simple songs, but I was interested in playing these songs. I started seeking out songs to play, and over time, I could do more than power chords. I thought about scales very frequently, since considering tone relations was far more interesting than algebra. Thinking about how to stack chords or using modes kept my attention more than arguing about the definition of a word for a whole class period. Side note, some advice. IB Theory of Knowledge is a bullshit class. Back to the story. This channel exists because one day, back several years ago, I picked up a guitar and eventually decided to compose music from the theory I had learned up to that point. Now, and I'd say for the past couple years, there has not been a day where I have not thought about music. My only regret is that I did not start caring for music sooner. But before I started playing guitar, just a couple years before that, I tried to learn piano. And there are times where I wonder what would have happened if I stuck with piano from 5th grade and on. Every time I record something on a synthesizer, I begin to realize how my hands do not accomplish what I want to do because a synth isn't like a guitar. It is like a piano. I look at grand pianos, smile at the sound of them, but then remember how expensive and massive such an instrument would be. I look at an upright piano only to then remember this has to be retuned every time it gets moved. There is nowhere in my house that would have been able to fit such a thing, and again, it is also expensive. Even when I think, well, maybe when I have a permanent place of my own, I can only follow that thought up with, what about if I need to move somewhere else? I still have this Yamaha keyboard I got back in the 5th grade, constantly debating between if I should get rid of it or not. It reminds me of my first attempt at music, but just like the synths I use now, it reminds me that this isn't a piano. There isn't a series of strings or hammers, the cracking sound from the shifting wood and the body of the instrument, the weight of the keys, hell, even the feeling of the keys. It's plastic. There's no weights, it's the same generic grand piano sound font used everywhere, and it just doesn't feel like a piano. Whenever I've seen a real piano, I'm always drawn to it. While I could write something in Ableton, it sounds satisfying. I'm always reminded of a dream and a memory. Omori unintentionally reminds me of getting into music. Thinking about it now, when I first played Undertale and Earthbound was when I was learning 8 days a week and not arranging Spiritus Ex Machina or composing music for my own videos. Somehow a horror game doesn't make me scared of pianos, but of a fan base that may spill milk on the piano, making a huge mess and screwing up the keys. Nonetheless, it does leave quite the impression, even if you are not a musician, so I will reiterate once more. I'm not saying you should, have to, or need to play Omori. The only thing I am saying is that there is something you may decide on, and that is if you will make the game more popular, or keep it obscured by the clouds of mystery. Okay, now I'm going to tell you the truth and tell you what actually happened when I got to the ending of the game. So, to someone who has completed the game, imagine this emotional build-up for a few hours, when all of a sudden you do something by accident. You think, oh, well, I'll just restart. Only to discover you can keep going. So, maybe you did the right thing. Well, you keep going, and then it dawns on you, oh wait, this wasn't what I was supposed to do, is it? Well, afterwards I then went and did the right thing. But talk about ruining one of the most important moments of the game with EDM carnival music.